I think mentality is critical. I've lost it all before. I've had my house foreclosed on. I've had cars repossessed. I've got the knock at the door from the tow truck guy. Hey, I'm here to take your car. I don't believe in this nonsense of don't tell your kids about your money. Yes, we need to have fun. Yes, we need to go on vacations. Yes, we need to create memories, but not at the expense of our future.
All right, welcome to the Rad Dad Podcast. This is episode 43. I have Paris Cluff on, and this is the first time we've met.
It is.
It's good to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Just to start off, tell me a little bit about where you grew up and some highlights from your childhood.
Sure. So I actually grew up in Southern California. I was one of those kids that had dude was every other word, or I could hold whole conversations with just the word dude. I grew up on the beach a little bit. My dad was the mayor of a city in near LA, so I actually was born in East LA for the Cheech and Chong fans out there. I was actually literally born in East LA. Grew up in that area, moved to Newport Beach, Costa Mesa area. Grew up there as a beach bum a little bit, rock climber, stuff like that. Then left, did a mission for my church, and while I was gone, my family moved to Central California. And when I came back, that's where I met my wife. And 11 months after I came back, I was married, and we were starting our family. So I've just always had an entrepreneurial spirit to me. So I tried corporate America a little bit and did pretty okay with that. But then I jumped out and started on my own. So, but that's kind of my background. I moved to Utah about 3 years ago. I tell people that I'm a Newsom refugee, so I fled from the state anyways. So that was kind of fun. So that's how I got to here and where I am now. So
does a thought ever cross your mind that your childhood is one that will never be replicated again just because of technology?
Oh, seriously. It was funny. I was helping my son when we were moving. I think we were cleaning up my garage, and there were some 3.5 floppy disks.
Oh yeah.
And I know some people out there might know what those are, but some people are like, what in the world is that? My son was like, Dad, what are these?
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
did you call it an artifact?
Yeah. And so even CDs and things like that. I mean, DVDs now are almost going that way. So it's just wild how much technology is changing our world right now.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's affected your career path and kind of where you've gone with.
Oh yeah. And how my services are delivered almost entirely. Yeah.
So a lot of people, so you went corporate and then flip-flop to entrepreneurship or kind of what you do now. A lot of people do the opposite as well, right? They go into corporate America. Who do you think's happier?
Well, it depends. You can be an intrapreneur, which is somebody who really has the go-getter drive to build something great within an organization that's doing something great. I don't have that. So I was like, that's not happiness for me. Happiness for me, I tell people I am unemployable simply because I'm more like a cat. I don't like having those kinds of things taken care of me. I'm an entrepreneur where I like to go out and make my own way and build my own path and provide solutions and value to the marketplace. So that's kind of some things that I've been able to, in the process of personal development. Entrepreneurship is a great personal development program. And so you've got to really, and I've learned how to teach that to my kids. One of the things that really kind of pushed me over the edge to quit my job was one day I was leaving for work, and my now 24-year-old, who was just a little boy at the time, says, Dad, please don't leave. Dad, please don't leave. Can you just stay and play for a little longer? And I'm like, oh man, I have to go to work, and there's some that pulls at your heartstrings, of course.
Yeah.
However, there's some good, you need to show a good example of a work ethic, right? Like your kid still needs to realize, hey, we all have to work, bro. We can't just play all day long.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it kind of pulled at my heartstrings a different way, where I was like, you know what? I have it in me to go out and do something on my own where I could have more time freedom. And so that interaction with my son, I remember him, like, he ran up to the door and like put his arms on the door, front door, and said, Dad, don't leave. And that just visual is in my mind still, even to this day. And so I've been self-employed for, 22 years.
Awesome. So give me a quick background of what you do now.
So I do financial coaching and insurance. At one point in my past, I was licensed to sell securities and assets under management, and investments and things of that nature. And then I really liked education. I like teaching people about, how money works, how to win the money game. I jokingly tell people that, I want to teach you what you didn't learn in school. And I talk to people about getting their MBA. We traditionally see MBA as the Master's in Business Administration, but I'm like, no. The MBA I'm talking about is a massive bank account. And so
I love it. I'll get that MBA.
Right? Let's go for that MBA.
Yeah,
everybody ought to be striving for that MBA. So I just really wanted to teach. And so I have the opportunity to, in fact, what got me into the industry in the first place was I was learning about the 401k at work. I was trying to figure out what I should do for my own money and my own investments. And I was reading books, different books from, that I'd buy and get. And I had a coworker. Once I kind of figured out what I was going to do, I had a coworker say, "Hey, I see you reading all these books. What can you teach me? I just qualified for the 401k too. Like, can you help me pick the right thing?" And I'm like, I'm not a professional at that point. And so I said, "Sure, I'll help you. Just what I learned from these books." And she was an older lady compared to me, and she's actually about as old as I am now, by the way. But she was an older lady, more experienced, lots of different companies and jobs, and so I figured she knew some things that I didn't, that I could learn. And she said, "Paris, you have a gift. You should do this for a living. Like, I finally understand what to do with my money in the 401k and how to pick the right things." And I was like, maybe I should do it. And so that's kind of what got me started in the industry in the first place, was just the ability to teach and explain things that traditionally are thought of as hard to understand, but really reduce them down to something simple and easy to understand. And so I started a YouTube channel recently, a couple years ago, and I have a financial coaching business that I'm launching here pretty soon with some courses and other things like that to really help people, help people get their MBA, right?
Yeah.
So
I've thought a lot about just financial planning and stuff, and I think from what I've observed, my age group, I'm 32, so people maybe a little older and a little younger, we're not necessarily staying at a job for 30 or 40 years and then collecting retirement. Mm-hmm. So our retirement plan is pretty much up to us.
Yep.
And talking to friends and family and stuff, the general consensus is that no one really knows how to approach it. They would rather just make enough money and hire somebody to manage their assets or whatever it is. But I don't think there's an understanding. Is that something you've seen as well?
There's a lot of misunderstanding about, I jokingly tell people, when I first qualified for the 401k, I barely knew how to spell 401,
yeah.
And what is a 401k? Like, what does that even mean? Like, why did they name it that? And some of those things that are just interesting as you start to learn a little trivia, it's literally section 401, paragraph K of the IRS tax code.
There you go.
Like, somebody was so, creative that's all they could come up with. But it's true. There's a lot of people that just don't understand. And frankly, I had the opportunity in my career to actually run an agency. And I was a trainer at an agency. I would train hundreds of agents across the state and stuff like that. And I would hear stories of other agents who were supposed to be professional and knowledgeable and knew things. And I would say, what are you saying to your clients? If that's what you think, what are you saying to your clients? Holy smokes. So there's some things it's not hard. It's simple. But you definitely need to get the right advice from the right person, and not somebody who's trying to sell you something that you may or may not need.
Yeah, I unfortunately, I used to scroll TikTok and it was just like, man, I need this investment. I need to do that. I need to buy an NFT. I need Bitcoin. It was just like all this information. It's like, how do I filter that down into what I actually need? Mm-hmm. Because I'm not making copious amounts of money where I can just throw it around and try out different things, like I need to be a little more calculated. Mm-hmm. So what's the first step in planning, I guess?
Well, one of the things that I really try to teach people is foundationally that you have to have your foundation set, and then you can build from there. And I actually have my brother called me the other day, actually, and he's probably going to watch this actually, but he was talking to me about this Bitcoin that he's got. It's gone through the roof, and as of the recording of this video, it's done very well in the last few days. Mm-hmm. And he's like, what do I do? What do I, should I go for it? Should I put more in? What should I do? Yeah. And I even had another buddy call me the other day, and he's like, Paris, I have people that I know that are multimillionaires because they did an NFT and made a bunch of money, or they did Bitcoin and they tripled or 10x their money and all these things. And I said, well, all of that is fantastic. And if you have the money to lose, because you could lose it, then use that money toward it. But the foundation is you want to first get your cash flow. You want to understand. In my program, I start with mindset. You got to believe in the habits and the skills and the beliefs that you have around money are probably the most important, because if you don't believe that you can achieve wealth, you won't even try. You have to have the why before you can really understand the how. And once I kind of talk to people about the why of, getting themselves set properly, they'll figure out the how, and the how comes more readily. And they're willing to discipline their spending. They're willing to get to the point where, hey, I'm going to make sure that I have more coming in than going out. And then I'm going to make sure that I'm out of debt, or getting out of debt, or on my way to being out of debt. And then I'm going to make sure I have the proper savings. You genuinely need to have, especially in today's world, any emergency could hit at any time. I have had so many side swipes in my life. I'm currently 49 years old, and I've had so many things happen in my life where I just got out of nowhere, out of the blue. What in the world? So having good insurance, having money to pay for the deductibles, and the 3 to 6 months of savings, like that's legit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In a high yield savings account, by the way, not in a commercial bank, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In a high yield savings account that's getting good things, and then go make sure that your financial independence number, or there's a lot of talk about the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. And there's a calculation you can do that kind of gives you the idea of what you should be saving or investing toward. And then once that's all laid out, like if you have extra money after all that, like your emergency fund is full, your insurance is paid up, all the stuff that's happening, if all that's okay and you still have extra money, now it's time for Bitcoin. Now it's time for stocks, individual stocks. Now it's time to go do some things like that. Now, I highly recommend that there's really 3 major areas to build wealth. And one is the stock market, of course. Index funds is what I highly recommend. Not a professional, I'm not licensed anymore, so I have to be careful. But I say for sure an index fund is fantastic. Beyond that though, like real estate, like if somebody's got the know-how for real estate, go. If somebody's got the know-how to build a business, go, do that. That's maybe where you reinvest a lot of your money, because that can be a fantastic retirement plan.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned a business, because it's a risk just like any other investment, but you're investing back into yourself.
Oh yeah.
Right. I want to get your thoughts on, I want to go back and talk a little bit about mindset and money.
Sure.
That's been a really interesting conversation to me in the last 5 years, because I've been on this journey of discovery of how I approach money and my mindset with money. And I was raised, or I don't know if it was the way I was raised, but I wasn't raised with rich parents, but I feel like people that were around that wealth and were brought up in a wealthy family, it comes more naturally to them because they have a positive relationship with money. So talk to me about what you think about that. I just want to
that's true. Somebody who grew up there's also, it's kind of like the old story of, if you grow up and your parents are smokers, you're probably going to smoke. Well, there's people who don't. And so how do you calibrate for that? Or how do you, adjust for that? Same thing is true in several families that have very little, and they strive and they see their mom or dad, maybe they're in a single parent family and their dad or mom are cranking out 2 or 3 jobs and they're at home. They can be derelict very quickly. They can go down a path of gang membership perhaps, or just they don't feel like it's worth it, so they don't fight for it. Or they're like, man, I see the struggle, I see the fight, I'm going to make a name for my family. I'm going to take that and respect what that struggle my mom and dad did, and I'm going to go for it. And then but you're right, the wealthy, and there's wealthy people that do think things do come easily because they talk about it around the family table, kitchen table. Yeah. They talk about wealth and investments, and they talk about budgeting and management money and things of that nature. But then there's also the trust fund babies, that take for granted. Right. They go get on their drugs, and they're just always they're partying, and they're just the gigolos of their group. And so it really boils down to what do you want out of life, and if you want to have and bring value to life, and if you have the ability to say to yourself, you know what, I came from money, but I'm gonna keep it going. One of the studies that's out there is that most millionaires, self-made millionaires, by the way, most millionaires are self-made. It's like 80+% of millionaires today are self-made. They did not inherit the money. It wasn't gifted. There was no other outside. They were self-made from scratch. Then when they create this wealth, they're really worried about their kids because their kids are like moochers. Like they're just, they don't really want to, they've never had a struggle. So they don't understand the struggle that it took to make those. And so they kind of just expect, and that expectation is negative. And so when I sit down with somebody to talk to them about their finances, I want to say, tell me a little bit about how you grew up. Like, what was your family like a little bit? There's a great book out there called The Next Millionaire Next Door. And it talks a lot about some of this stuff. And so financial psychology is in fact, what's really funny is that for years, it was all about the numbers and charts and graphs. But then the financial planning industry as a whole, all the schools that teach people how to become financial professionals are now adding in behavioral finance, financial psychology, because, the reason so many Americans right now, for example, are in debt. Well, everybody knows that if I have $5 and I spend $6, it's not, the math is easy, right? You have $5, you can't spend more than $5, but we do. And why do we do that? Because maybe it's because when we were growing up, we didn't get very much. And so we have to now prove to ourselves that we can still have it. We can manage it. We can make it work. Or maybe it's because we need to keep up with the next door neighbor. Maybe they just got a new boat. Now I got to get a new boat. Maybe there's a whole bunch of different reasons why that happens. And so social indifference is a big key element to whether or not you're going to be able to make it ever make it. I have a cool survey that you can take to kind of give you an idea of how well you are on the scale of your current financial planning attitudes and behaviors. And maybe I'll give you the link for the show, and you can put it, and people can take that quiz. It takes 1 or 2 minutes to do, and it's kind of an introductory quiz to what I have as a much larger opportunity. But it's cool to see, like, hey, these are some things that you kind of see where you are on the spectrum of needing progress, being okay, or hey, you're doing really well, just in your financial planning kind of mentality and your skill set. And then it kind of gives you a few tips. And then, of course, if you want to engage, and there's an email that you get afterwards that kind of tells you a few more things to kind of move along the way. But I'll give you a link for that now, so you can put it in your show notes or whatever. So I think mentality is critical. And so one of the big things that you have to work on is your mindset. Your mindset changes everything. And if you have the desire, then the first thing I would work on is reinvesting back into yourself. And whatever extra money you have, don't go buy stocks, don't go buy real estate, don't go buy investments that you would purchase before you start buying education and working on your mindset, books and mentors and coaches and things like that. That's what I would put my money in first. If I had to do it over again, I would do that first, because there's no better investment than in yourself, in your mindset, in your thought process. And, I think it was Zig Ziglar that said, maybe it wasn't. Anyways, I remember somebody saying that you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. And so if your net worth is low, it might be because your friends are
hanging out with broke people.
Hanging out with broke people, exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it kind of gives you something to think about.
Yeah, it definitely answers my question. I agree with what you said. And I'm going to put a big but in there.
Sure.
And the but is, I see these videos going around where it's like, it shows these charts. If you start investing $500 a month at 22 compared to 32, and the difference when you're 65 is like millions of dollars,
it is,
right?
Yeah.
So
that's true.
Are you going to stick to your guns and still say educate first, even though you sacrifice a few critical years?
I think that if somebody has the income, let's say they have the cash flow, and that's where I would say, so earlier I mentioned that you have your foundation. And your foundation to me is, let's say you're 20 years old and you want to have $1 million by the time you're 65. With inflation and time value of money, it's probably not going to be worth much. $1 million is going to be worth, but let's just, for fun, let's say $1 million. That's typically a good goal. Well, you're going to invest a lot less at 20 years old than you will at 30 years old. So if you have the income and you have the cash flow and the positive cash flow, which is the different is a positive number between what you're earning and what you're spending, your expenses, then if you have a positive cash flow, I would put as much as possible towards a very foundational investment, like a good solid 8 to 10%, like something easy. And then with the extra money, that's what I remember I mentioned, that extra money. With that extra money, first start with education. So get something going. Get $100 if you're 20, you're 25. Get 100, $200, whatever. Like all my kids, when they turned 18, I'm like, we open an investment account. I'm like, get $100 a month into this thing.
Yeah.
You're gonna thank me later.
Yeah.
And so when you're 40 years old, it's like hundreds, thousands, if not thousands, to hit the same goal. And I have actually a whole video on that I've done on my that I should do. Actually, an idea. Anyway, so I highly recommend that as soon as you get that foundation set, the next really big investment you should make is in yourself, your mindset, and then go do the real estate, or go do the business, or go do the stock picking, or day trading, or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
But once you have your foundation set, it's that's the most important.
That makes sense. I'm so glad you were able to simplify that, because it seems like in the financial world and in the world as a whole, we just love to complicate things, especially on social media. We just love to complicate. But I think people that are new to this, and the younger generation, my generation, need to just simplify and start, like you said. So I really like that. What are some steps that fathers can take to just financially prepare for the future?
Well, I call them the 3 P's of fatherhood. Fathers need to preside, and they need to protect, and they need to provide. And providing is that financial element, and actually protection too, if you really think about it. Like, I remember I've been in life insurance and other insurance I've sold for many years, and I remember sitting across the table of a father, and he said, "Well, if I die, my wife's family will take care of her." And I just thought, what kind of man are you?
Yeah.
Like, your job as a man is to take care of your family and make sure you protect them. I literally just heard a story today. I was on a conference call, and a guy was talking about how he went to a funeral, and he was an insurance agent, and the wife came up to him and said, "Why didn't you tell us you sold insurance?" He's like, "Well, I thought you were doing well. Look at all this stuff you have. You have the nice house, the boat, the nice cars." Yep. She said it was all on debt. It was all on credit. None of it was sustainable. And now that he's dead, my husband's dead, it was all based on his income, and we're going to have to sell everything, and we were going to be ruined. That is not a man that protected his family.
Yeah.
He might have provided some nice lifestyle for them while he was alive, but he didn't protect them. So providing and protecting are important. And presiding is being able to make decisions, to be able to counsel with your spouse. That is from a father's perspective, to counsel with your wife, and then make decisions, and make wise decisions for your family. I have had, I've lost it all before. I've had my house foreclosed on. I've had cars repossessed. I've got the knock at the door from the tow truck guy. "Hey, I'm here to take your car." And I've had to move my family into some situations where it hit me hard, and I was like, this is not what I ever want to do again. And I'm going to teach everybody that I can to live a lifestyle where they'll never have to worry about those kinds of things. And the conviction I have about that is like ingrained in my bones. However, sometimes people don't respect it until they've gone through it. And so even if I preach it or teach it, or like really try to ingrain it in somebody in my coaching, they kind of give me the, yeah. It's like, no, dude. Okay. Once you go through it, once you lose everything, then you'll know what I'm saying. And you'll have wished you had listened.
Yeah. When you bring up the word protect, and I'm sure a lot of men go to like physically protecting, right? Mm-hmm. But it's interesting you brought up the financial aspect. I've never considered that train of thought, and I really like it. And it makes me want to get my things in order,
Yeah.
even more so than they already are.
And totally agree with physical protection too. Like
Yeah, of course.
I love my Second Amendment rights and all those types of things, but definitely it's broader than just the one area for sure.
Yeah.
And even spiritually, like emotionally and spiritually, we can protect our families from the world, especially the way the world is today. There's so many distractions and so many things coming at our kids that it's scary. Like you mentioned earlier, TikTok. I had a guy call me the other day he's a client now. He became a client. He called me and says, "Hey, Paris, I saw this TikTok where this guy was talking about doing this thing with insurance and doing that thing with investments and pulling out and this and that and the other self-fulfilling banks and infinite banking, like all this stuff he was talking about." And I'm like, all right, let's just tell me what you found, what you heard. He said, this is what he said, all this interest rate. And I'm like, I don't know what that guy's. Anyways, after we had a chance to like sit down, and I ran the numbers for him individually, specifically. He's like, why do they say all that stuff? I'm like, it's hype. It gets them views. And when you really get down to brass tacks, like you got to have somebody who's going to be willing to do that. I again, from an insider's perspective, I've sat down with other insurance agents, other financial professionals, people who were supposed to be giving unbiased advice, only to find out that they are struggling with their mortgage. And so they're trying to sell something more than they should to be able to make enough money to be able to pay for what they're doing because they're not planning with their own money properly. And so it's like, I don't ever want to make a decision based on a financial need. Like I want to have my money taken care of and then I'm cool. Like I can have a level head. I have confidence. I have serenity. I have temperance. And I can just say, you know what? I can get inspiration more quickly and more easily when my savings accounts are full. The hustle and the bustle and the quick, rapid decision making process like goes away, and you can just take whatever comes because I promise it will come. For example, I have a young man that I was in my church. I was over the young men. I would teach the youth group a little bit, and the 1 week I was in the youth group and he was doing great. The next Sunday, I find out he's in a coma on life support from some rare, weird disease bacteria that he got. And I'm like, I hope that they have the right insurance. All those questions come up. Like life happens, and it may not happen to you, but it'll happen to somebody you love. And I thankfully have enough money I can donate to their cause. So it's like having the opportunity to have yourself in a situation financially where you can take those opportunities. It can make the world a difference. And another thing about fatherhood specifically is that I don't believe in this nonsense of don't tell your kids about your money. I mean, you need to be careful. Like, you don't want them to be like, Dad, you just made how much? Then you're definitely buying me the Xbox. You know what I mean? Like, You don't want to be like that. So I teach my kids like how much it costs to run a household. They know how much the groceries are. They know how much the mortgage is. They know how much all those things are. They know how much money I make. They know what the difference is. They know that I'm saving. They know that we're working towards vacations. Like I get them on board. Like I'm in sales as a self-employed person. It's a little easier than if somebody's like working for a 9 to 5 or someone else. But if I tell the kids, hey, we're saving up for this vacation, and they know that if I make more calls and make more sales, I can make more money to get a better vacation, then they're like, Dad, get on the phone. What are you doing up here? Like they can motivate me.
That's awesome.
to do more and be more.
Yeah.
And so there's some things like that can happen. So as a father, it's important to give and instruct. Like I just believe that there's fathers out there, unfortunately, that are like, these kids are my kids. They're subjugated to me. I'm going to rule over them. And I'm like, well, good luck with that. But I've lived my kids. I've treated my kids as fellow sojourners on this planet. I've treated my kids as I just got here first. I'm going to be a guide. I'm going to be a mentor. I'm going to teach everything that I can to you. Both, not both because there's more than one. There's more than two: spiritually, emotionally, physically, temporally. I'm going to teach you as much as I can, and hope that you take what I have taught you and go out and go forth and be productive yourself. I don't know what else to wish for, but that, and that's what I've got. I've been very fortunate. I've been blessed, and I have some good kids that. Unfortunately, they have a little bit more credit card debt than I want, but they're doing good things. So.
Just one last thing on the note of protecting and being a protector in that. I want to get your thoughts on life insurance, because there's it can be an investment. There's a lot of different ways, term, non-term.
Sure.
Talk to me about what you know.
So there's term or temporary insurance, and I'd get a chuckle out of, in the life insurance industry, some of us who sell everything get a chuckle out of calling people who sell only term insurance termites, because they only sell term. So we tease. It's important to have something. You need to have something, and if what you can afford right now, if what fits into your budget, so that you're not overextended or out of your budget, and your expenses are within, you're living within your means. If what you can afford right now is term, get it, and don't worry about it. You can always buy a permanent insurance later. I personally believe that an overall financial plan, that permanent insurance, like a whole life or an IUL, are the two that I really like, the IUL products. It may be too technical for those if you're listening. We can get into more details if you want, but those are the really index universal life is what it basically means. And it's those are kind of, I feel like every financial plan could have one of those and be really well-rounded and be really full. Like that's a good fit. And here's why, is that a lot of people think that, well, I can just buy term insurance and invest a bunch of money in the mutual funds and then I can go for it. Well, yes, on paper that works. And in fact, it looks really good in the sales meetings. Boy, I'll cancel my permanent policy and do that every day, right? But in real life, vast majority of people will dip into their mutual funds and they'll never get there. With permanent insurance, you actually have a little bit more incentive to keep it there and to use it. And it's structured in such a way that it works for you when you access it, and you can make it work for you. So to me, and this goes back to math versus habits and beliefs. Money has more to do with habits and beliefs than it does with math. And that's because of this similar issue. Like everybody knows that they need to invest in the stock market or in a 401k or retirement plan in order to make it. Everybody knows. Everybody watching this show right now knows that at some point you want to stop working. Well, if you don't have enough money to do that, you're not going to be able to. So why aren't you preparing now for that very thing? Everybody knows there's only two guarantees in life, right? Death and taxes.
Yep.
So why not have a life insurance product that will pay you when you die? 90 some odd % of term policies never pay. That's why life insurance companies love them, because it's all revenue. They never have to pay because most people die after the term ends.
Yep.
Where a permanent insurance policy is great. Well, you might say, well, Paris, when I'm 80 years old, what's my wife going to need a couple $100,000 for? Well, I promise you, I work with Medicare eligible individuals, people that are 65 plus. I have clients that actually I have a client that was about to turn 100, but I think she didn't make it. But so I have clients from 65 to 99, and I'm telling you, they all, if their spouse passed away, they would be blessed greatly with that extra money to be able to provide for their grandkids, grandbabies, just all kinds of stuff like that. So an estate plan, one of the other things too, is that estate planning, life insurance is a key element to estate planning. And a lot of people think, well, I'm never going to be rich enough to worry about that. Oh, no, you just, 30, 40 years ago, houses were, 50 to 100,000.
Right.
Now they're 500 to a million. And what's going to happen in the next, we can't even imagine. I don't know what this house, you bought this house for, but could you imagine in 30 years, this house being 10 times the value? Right? Like
it makes me sick, but
that's kind of how it's gone,
it's
right?
Good for me.
Yeah. And so that's kind of how it works. So your estate planning is, it's really important. Not only that, but I've never had anybody tell me that they got too much money when they had a loved one pass away. However, I've had more than I can count tell me they wish they would have bought more life insurance. Not only that, but I've never had anybody tell me they had too much money when they retired.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody say, I've got way too much money.
Right.
But I have had people tell me, man, I wish I would have invested more. In fact, I remember sitting in a client's house. She was 60 plus years old. And she says it was a rundown mobile home. And she turns to me and she says, we lived life to the fullest every year. We always had the new lease. We maxed out my husband's income. We always had we always went on the vacations. We had the big house. And now we're living in, like, I was nervous to sit on the couch. Like it was like not good. And she says, Paris, if you can tell any of your friends, tell them as young as possible. Save for the future because it's not worth it. It's not worth it to be out of balance. Yes, we need to have fun. Yes, we need to go on vacations. Yes, we need to create memories, but not at the expense of our future. Don't spend your future today. Balance your today with your future. And there's a way to do that and live a good life. And if we all did that, or if more of us did that, we would have less consumer debt. We would have less bankruptcies. We would have less divorces. Like, really think about a father. If you're as important as a father is, and being a rad dad, like, what's the saying? There's no greater message you can give to your kids than to tell them how much you love their mom. Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a true principle. So I think that if you're treating your wife properly, your kids are going to look at that example. Absolutely. And they're going to be like, man, my dad is awesome. I mean, how many times do you see the sports guys ever say, hi, Dad? None of them. They always say, hi, Mom. So, every boy, every young man, every little girl loves their mom. There's an affinity towards mom, right? And rightly so, biologically so, And so if I can treat my wife like a queen, like my partner, like my co-traveler, my kids look at that and they're like, they know that my kids know, and probably more than they want to, because I love kissing her in front of them, and they're like, Dad, that's gross. Anyways, they know. And I think that's all part of it, though. Like, divorce is like, what is one of the leading causes of divorce is financial stress and strain. Right. And so if I can help somebody fix their money, I'm not going to eliminate all the problems. But if I can help somebody fix their money, boy, their family life is better. Their marriage is better. Their way they treat their kids is better. I mean, how many men go to job, work 9 to 5, they're overwhelmed, they got all the bills to pay, their boss is yelling at them, screaming up this, that, and the other, got all these projects they have to do. They come home and little Johnny or little Susie's like, hey, Dad, we want to play. And you're like, yeah, leave me alone. You know what I mean? Like, how can you be a rad dad when you got all that stress? Like, right. And I'm not saying that you can have your MBA, your massive bank account, and still have stressful situations come up from time to time. But if your life is constantly in a state of that cycle of stress, you're just doing it wrong.
Yeah, you're in survival mode. And, everyone loves to say money isn't happiness, but it sure causes a lot of grief.
It sure does.
And it can be a huge weight. What advice would you give to fathers that have that financial weight? And, besides making more money, what advice can you give those fathers?
Well, I would say that first, get your priorities. I think, to me, and I'm a religious guy, so I think it's God telling you that it's time for change. And I don't know what that change is going to be, or what it should be or ought to be for you. That's going to be between you and your spouse and God himself. But I think when you have situations where you feel like you're out of control, like it's like you're helpless almost and headed towards hopeless, that's a time that's whenever in my life anyways, when I've ever had those experiences, that's where I feel like God's telling me, hey, put on the brakes, buddy. It's time to reassess what you're doing. And so I would just say, if somebody's in a situation where they're totally stressed out, it's time to make a change. And I have a saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And if you don't like what you're getting, change what you're doing. And it's hard sometimes, but it's simple, right? So I would say if somebody's struggling with stuff, clearly you need to work on, and part of the equation may eventually be make more money. But I promise you, if you can get quiet enough and get this distress out of your head, you can manage your money properly. You can get to the point where you're like, okay, I can manage what's happening. Then you can say, okay, what skill do I have that's marketable? You can get a raise at work. You can negotiate a better salary. You can maybe go back to school and become more valuable, so that within your company as an entrepreneur, you become more valuable and they want to give you more. There's some great, matter of fact, I'm going to be working with a guy who's a career coach, and I'm going to do an interview on my YouTube channel with him. And he works with a lot of people, but his biggest claim to fame was that he helped somebody in an interview get an $80,000 raise, just with all the ways that the negotiation went. That it ended up being about $80,000 in the career negotiation for the hiring and moving forward with him. And so I'm going to have him on to do some interviews. But you can negotiate. Like, knowing what's possible sometimes opens your mind to say, whoa, if it's possible for them, maybe it's possible for me.
Right.
And so that's where I think mindset is critical. That's where I think reading books, getting mentors, getting not better friends. I don't think you should replace people, but maybe you ought to just put some people on the back burner and go get some friends that will stretch you and cause you to grow and think differently. And then maybe you'll be able to realize, you know what, maybe I don't need all these things. Maybe I don't need all this stuff. Maybe I can go minimalism for a little while, and then I can create a lifestyle and rebuild. Like I'm working with one of my clients right now. She's going through a divorce, and she's used to 2 incomes, and she's going to have to go down to 1. And so she's like, what do I do? And I'm trying to talk to her and say, hey, look, you're going to have to back off and rebuild. And so backing off sucks. It's no fun. Yeah. And so maybe you have to back off a few things right now. Maybe you have to get rid of a few things. You have to slow down and eliminate, add by subtracting, as they say. And then once you finally got yourself in a place where you're like, okay, I can breathe, let's go make more money. Like one of my mantras is live within your means and then grow your means.
I like it.
So discipline yourself. So I had a friend of mine say, hey, Paris, like, what's the difference between you and like Dave Ramsey and like, oh no, he said, Paris, you're more like a cross between Dave Ramsey and Robert Kiyosaki. In terms of how you advise people. Like, you definitely honor the discipline that Dave Ramsey kind of preaches and teaches, but you definitely love the investment and go for it and build a business and real estate and all this stuff. And you teach people that stuff too. And I do. I think that there's room for it all. In fact, just kind of a side note, I earn more money from my credit cards than I ever have paid them in interest. Like, I don't pay interest on credit cards, but I get paid because I do the cash back thing. I love credit cards, dude. I get paid. Some of the years I've had commas in the cash back from my credit cards. Like almost every year I have at least one card that has a comma in the cash back. So I'm like, what kind of, the idea that credit cards are completely evil is, I get it for some people. There's some people that need to believe that so that they stay away from them. But man, if you can use it as a tool, like it's supposed to be used, it can be a pretty valuable tool. And so I'm just thinking that if you're out there struggling right now and you're listening to this and you're like, what can I do? Take a deep breath. Number one, realize that you can do it. Like, you have the capacity within you to do it. Like, when I lost everything, and I mean everything, like my house was foreclosed. My business went from 6 figures down to I think I made 20 grand that next year after I lost everything. So I was, 6 figures to 20 grand is a big loss in your income. Yeah. My wife had to go back to work after 10 years of being a stay-at-home mom. Like, I spent some time sucking my thumb in the fetal position, as they say. I was like, it was bad. And so I just said, you know what? I owned that. I owned that. I needed that moment to just be in that space for a minute and realize that the way I was doing, like what I was doing, I was not getting what I wanted. So I needed to change what I was doing. And God was like, boom, you need to change some things. And so from that point forward, I've changed my whole way of managing my own money. I've made more money since then than I ever made in my life. And so it was interesting how that all worked out. But I'm just telling you, if you're struggling right now, keep fighting and get with men and other people that are going to inspire you and motivate you and bring you up and lift you up and raise you up, because you can do it. And there are ways the skill set of money can be learned, it can be taught, and you can do it. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I like that. I think when we start to make those, at least in my personal experience, when I start to make those changes in my life that I feel necessary, the money just seems to fall in place. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's by means I can't explain,
right?
Or ways that I just never even expected. So I think that's awesome. Hearing your story about one of your rock bottoms, maybe your only rock bottom, I don't know. It made me think about how us as fathers, we struggle with an audience. It's when you have kids, they're watching you, and you have the opportunity to teach them how to get through hard times and how to push forward, or you can curl up in a ball and you can stay there. Yeah. Right. And it's okay to feel down, like you said, to own it. Mm-hmm. But then you get up and you keep working. Right. And it can be a really good learning opportunity for our kids to see how we struggle. Mm-hmm. Right.
You grow from struggle. Like a butterfly is a butterfly because of struggle. The most beautiful things in this world have come from some of the greatest struggles. Like I would never wish that anybody go through what I went through financially and even emotionally, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Like it's what taught me, it's what gave me and made me kind of who I am. So
yeah, I love that. As far as fatherhood, what lesson have you learned that really you didn't expect to learn in fatherhood?
One of the greatest lessons being a father that I learned, and this is going to be, again, a little bit from a religious perspective, because I believe that God the Father is looking down on us. And one of the lessons that I learned that I didn't necessarily expect to learn as a father is that as I mentor my children, the love that I have for them, anything that I would do anything for them. Like some days I facepalm at the stuff my kids do. Like I'm just like, what in the world are you doing? And then, or some days my kids will do something that gets me so angry, I want to just take them out, right? Yeah. Like I brought you into this world and I'm taking you out of this world. Mm-hmm. And then I get this really amazing, I call it insight, where my Father in heaven is like, oh yeah? Well, if I had taken you out when you did X, Y, and Z, you wouldn't be around. So you better have some mercy and some grace for your kid. And I was like, oh snap, I better have some mercy and grace for my kid.
Yeah.
And so that perspective's helped me. That's something that I did, as I manage my kids, sometimes I feel like, oh man, I'm just a little kid to God and what he's trying to get me to do. And in that I have more grace and more mercy and more kindness. As I kind of come off of my anger, I can kind of guide and direct my family a little bit better, realizing that if God can be kind to me when I'm such an idiot, then I can be kind to my kids. And that kind of that mirror image, I call it, they call it, I call it the mirror. When I see something that I don't like in somebody else, I just get this epiphany or insight that says, you're looking at something that you do that bugs other people. So if you want to be a hypocrite, go ahead and move forward with your justice.
Yep.
But if you want to be somebody that's going to be kind and controlled, you learn the lesson, and still you may still have to discipline the kids, but you'll do it with more kindness and with a different perspective.
Yeah.
At least I have.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. What's a great way that we can invest in our kids that's not a financial way?
So I was listening to a guy years ago. His name is Dennis Waitley, and he's a guru, or he was a supposed guru in personal development and other things. And he says, give your kids roots and wings, not loot and things. And I thought that was really cool. Mm-hmm. Like, when my kids were very young, I would discipline them with physical actions. Once they start to get to the point where they could understand and I could reason with them, I would tell them.
What age is that? Please tell me.
It's honestly,
because I'm not there.
So I've got, so my oldest is 24. I have 5 kids. My oldest is 24. The next one is 21, and the next one is 19. My 21 and 19 are getting married this year, so I'm headed into a brand new waters here on my experience of fatherhood with their fiancés and just being a father of the bride and all that. Mm-hmm. My next is a 17, and I have an 11-year-old. And what I've noticed is that from about 1 to, I call them the inquisitive 2s. People call them the terrible 2s. But I like to take time. Like they're learning, their mind is racing. And so I like to take them through and say, okay, I'm going to give up a few minutes of my day so I can take some time with you, rather than just because dad said, or, anything like that. I'll say, okay, if you take the time to give them a few minutes, usually they're cool and you can get away. But if you treat them improperly, then they'll be mad at you, right? And then you have a bad feeling, and you're like, oh, then dad's a jerk and your kid's an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, so I just took the time. That's what I did. And so from about 1 to 2, there's a little tough. From 2 to 6 or a little whatever. 8 is kind of when they start getting things figured out. 9 and 10 is when they can really reason. 8, 9, and 10 is usually when they can start to reason. And I stopped being as physical at that age because I could tell them, I'm very disappointed in what you did. And that stung worse than a spanking did. And so from that point forward, like even today, I don't yell or argue with my kids. I'll tell my son, my 17-year-old the other day, he was not doing something that he ought to have been doing, and nothing bad. It was just he wasn't doing what he's supposed to do. And I just said, hey, I don't like having these conversations, bro, but I need you to know that you're in a position right now where you need to be corrected. And I'm correcting you, and you need to make some changes in your life because you're not doing the consequences of what you're doing are going to be greater than you want. And so make the change so that you can get what you want. Again, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. And so I've noticed from about 12, honestly, if you can make it for our family, our kids, and every kid's different, but for our kids, it was like 13 to 16 was like, oh man, I'm going to kill you. You're going to kill us. Like, yeah. I think I got most of my gray hairs during those age groups. For some reason, up till about 13, they were pretty, cool. 13 to 16 was really hard. Junior, senior year, things started to settle down. It was usually 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade that were like 8th grade, maybe 8, 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there.
Those are hard years.
Those are really hard years for kids. But once they become seniors, it's like they're back from whatever pod land they were left to. And like my son, who's 24, he's on his own. He's out there trying to do some good things with his life. And we just have great conversations. Like, of course, he asks counsel and we talk and we work together. But once they get to that age, it's kind of nice. And I'm looking forward to having my daughters come back to us, my wife and I, and say, hey, I have this issue I have a new baby, or, I'm married now. Like, what would you do? How do you do? Like, I'm looking forward to that new phase in life. But there's some different phases of age groups, categories that you're like, oh my gosh.
Well, you got me excited.
Am I going to make it?
You got me excited. So a little worried too.
Yeah. No, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's also the greatest thing you'll ever do.
Do you think that the happiest you've ever been is the happiest you'll ever be?
No, I think that I feel like what's interesting is that I was telling somebody, a good buddy of mine, I was talking to him on the phone today, and he was like, I was telling him I've been married for 27 years and to the same woman, by the way. And I love, and not, I guess, anyways, I should be careful with that. I hope not to offend anybody, but I love my wife more today than I did, I think, when I met her. I love my kids more in many ways than I did when they were, when they first come out and you're holding them in the hospital, there's just nothing like it. There's just absolutely nothing like it. But then as you sacrifice and you give and you just give and you give and you give, and then you see the rewards, you're like, wow, I didn't think I didn't think I could love or had this big. It's like I tell people too, like who are single, like you think you love right now, wait till you get married. And then you love kind of doubles. But then when you have your first kid, your love like triples or like it doubles again. And you're like, man, I didn't even think this was possible. And then every kid it doubles. And then as your kids get, like I have son-in-laws potentially now, like that are coming, like my love is expanding. And I just feel like if you do it right, I'm sure there's people it could answer yes to your question. And I'm sorry for those folks, but if you're doing it right, I think that you're always expanding. You're always becoming, you're always learning to be happy. You're always learning new ways to be happy and expanding your love and expanding your capacity and growing. That's to me, that's part of the point of being here, is to explore and to learn and to grow and develop and to find joy in what we do in the journey. Like to use an example, I don't like lifting weights in the gym, but I like how I feel after I've lifted the weights in the gym. Right. Does that make sense? Like, I don't like going through trials and struggling and just like my wife has had some pretty significant medical issues so far this year. And I've been stressed out. I'll be honest. I've been stressed out. And like to the point where I'm like, do I need to see a counselor? So on my own, but I was grateful because as I got the bills and as I figured out what's happening, I looked at my finances and I realized I'm going to be okay. Like I planned properly.
Right.
Like you can't plan for everything, right? There's some things that will happen in life that you may be beyond what you could plan for, but I planned sufficiently such that the trial I'm going through right now, I'm going to be okay. And I still have, like, I've been okay. And I will be okay. And I'll have, and not only that, but 2 marriages to pay for, and we'll still be okay. Like we have it, like it's all going to be okay. And that's kind of the good news of life, is that if you like some days I look and think to myself, how did I get to 49? You know, you're 32 right now. You're
I feel it,
17 years behind me. And I look at my dad who's 80 some odd and I'm like, I'll call him some days and I'll be like, Dad, how did you do it? Like, dude, you're my hero right now. Like 49 was tough. Like 30 was like, right? You're like, man, this is the toughest 32 years I've ever had. Right. Well, for me, it's the toughest 40, right? So it's, I just look to people who've gone through some things and I'm just like, man, you're my hero. Like I have a lot more respect for people who go through trials and come out having endured it well and not having become better and not letting it make them bitter. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm sure in the last 49 years of your life and really the last 20, you've been able to observe a lot of different fathers. Mm-hmm. And especially with like, you know, your kids growing up, you see their friends and the way they were raised and stuff. Mm-hmm. Where do you think men are missing the mark in fatherhood?
I think it's a lot of it, a couple things. One of them is follow through. If you say to your kid, if you do this, then I'll do that. You had better do that. Whether it's positive or negative, like it's a consequence or a blessing. Like you better do what you say you're going to do, follow through. I remember years ago when I was single, sitting in church and a couple pews up, there was a woman and she was fighting with her kids to get them to sit still. And she was not able to pay attention to the sermon at all. And the dad was sitting there with his hands in his face, like I don't know what he was doing, but he was not doing anything to help. And I said to myself, I will never be that man.
Yeah.
And so when my kids do anything and my wife says something, when my wife says it, even if I don't agree initially, like I'm going to support her and then we'll go talk.
Yeah.
But that kid knows that no matter what is going to happen, mom and dad are coming at him united.
Yeah.
Like that's a non-negotiable in my family, in my marriage. Like that way the kids don't play us against each other. Like I love my parents, but they let us play them a little bit. And so that's another reason.
Kids pick that apart too.
Yeah. And I'm like, not happening in my family. And the kids know it. Like,
yeah.
And so those are a couple of things right off the top of my head that I think where men miss the mark is they don't support their wife, even if they don't agree. And the ability to listen to somebody who's saying something that you don't agree with and still remain calm and then be able to debate or reason with them is a skill. To me, that's a manhood. That's a masculine trait, frankly. Like I'm not triggered by what your beliefs are. Like I stand in my own beliefs. Like I don't have to worry about what you're going to say or not say. I know what my beliefs are. If you are worried about being, changed or influenced, then sure, you're going to be triggered because you don't stand strong in who you are.
Right.
And so I think that first off, for me, I was never going to be that man who let his wife struggle and strain and stress and let the kids kind of just play us back and forth. I was never going to be that dad. And then because another thing too is that I think a lot of men, they get so stressed out with life, and don't get me wrong, like reasonably so, that they don't take time. Like I took time with my kids and not as much as I could have or should have as I look back. There's times when I think to myself, did I do enough? Did I do it? Did I do enough? And I think I could beat any man, no matter how good or big or small, could beat themselves up for those types of things. Right. But just make an effort. If you make an honest effort, like my son comes home from school. He's like, Dad, I've been to some people's houses. Like every one of my kids have said this. I've been to friends' houses and they genuinely of their own accord come to me and said, Dad, we're grateful for the way you run our house. We've seen how other dads, my friends' dads run their house. And I'm just grateful the way you did it. And that's because I was intentional. I was on purpose. My family didn't happen on accident. I mean, some of it maybe, but I was as intentional as possible. Let's put it that way. I can't be 100%, but I was as intentional as possible. And I feel like it worked.
Awesome. I love it. That was a great answer. Well, the last question is the same question I ask all my guests. And that is, what is the most important lesson you want to leave with your children when you're no longer here?
I've actually had the opportunity to ponder that. And I think to me, as a religious individual, I think that the most important thing I could leave with my children is that God loves them and Jesus is their Savior. And if they will do anything in life, that they listen very carefully to their influence and their guidance, and they'll be okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts, insights, and stories. I really appreciate it. And I'm proud of you as a father and proud to call you a friend.
It was fun.
Awesome. Thank you.